All right, guys, this is episode 7 now of the Mystical Mountain podcast. You're on the Mystical Mountain, as you can see right here. I'm your host, Chad, and I'm here today with Thomas Steenburg, a Sasquatch researcher from British Columbia. And I'm going to hand it over here to Thomas, actually, and he can introduce a little bit about himself to everybody.
Hello, everybody. My name is Thomas Steenburg. I've been involved in the Sasquatch question since about the mid 1970s. I got my start. I was fortunate enough to get my start and get to work with a lot of the now unfortunately no longer with us originals like Rennie DeHinden and the late John Green and the late Grover Krantz, the late Bob Titmus. I knew and did work with them all. I've written 3 books, co-authored 2 others, and I guess now I've been referred to as one of the old timers in the Sasquatch field. I'm strictly old school, and I'm strictly zoological. And I feel that if the Sasquatch exist, and I only say if because I've never gotten a close-up view of one myself. I may have had a long-distance view of one, but I still won't say so because my basic philosophy since I began research has always been stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts. And I've lived by that since the beginning. And I wish people who got into this type of research now would do the same.
All right. I like it. Okay. So Thomas, I think I'm gonna start off by asking you. Let's just say hypothetically, Sasquatch is real. I haven't seen one myself either, but if I had to put money on it, I'd say they are real. But in your opinion, now, what exactly is Sasquatch? And I know you're a zoological, so if you could just tell me kind of specifically what you think would be your best guess.
I, in my opinion, based on the years I've been in on this and all the witnesses I've interviewed and the cases I've investigated, if this creature exists, we're dealing with a higher primate of some kind, unclassified higher primate. People like to separate ape and human, but they keep forgetting in uh, in uh, in the world of biology, humans are apes, so it's really a moot point. But I think that's what we're dealing with is an unclassified higher primate of some kind.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, even if you went back a million years, do you think there's any potentiality for any sort of even a small loose relation to us or
Tell you
no?
the honest truth, if the ancient man and the ancestors of the Sasquatch ever came together, I have the feeling both sides would probably flee each other on sight for the most part.
Hmm.
I mean, one of the most talked about possible links to the fossil record is an animal that's known as Gigantopithecus blackeye, whose skull you can see just over my left shoulder here. And the theory is that Giganto crossed what was the Bering Land Bridge at the same time as the ancestors of our First Nation people there. And Sasquatch is simply this species continuing. However, I must point out no fossil remains of Gigantopithecus has ever been found on this side of the Bering Land Bridge, and it's just an hypothesis.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you about that regarding Gigantopithecus. Um, if you could let some of us know who may not know, Gigantopithecus, this is like a confirmed skeletal discovery, right? And is there an estimation on how big the creature
He
was?
was reported to be between 8 and 10 feet tall, rather orangutan-like in appearance. And the late Grover Krantz, who was a friend of mine, had the theory based on what of the spread of the jaw that it may have been an erect biped, but other anthropologists since then disagree with that and said it was quadruped, but they don't really know. The first fossilized remains of Gigantopithecus were found in a Chinese Kuro shop by an anthropologist in the 1930s, who they were selling what they called dragon's teeth, which they would grind
Hmm.
up and use in aphrodisiac medicines and things like that. He recognized, being an he recognized what he was looking at as something significant, and that's how Gigano first came to be known. Since then, a few jawbones have been found in the caves and the regions of northern China, and other samples of the Gigano fossils have been found in North Vietnam and a little north of there,
Hmm.
and not much after that. But it's generally believed that Gigano probably went extinct finally about 15,000 years ago. Now, if
Wow.
Sasquatch exists and is Gigano, it didn't go extinct. It's still around, and Sasquatch is simply this line continuing.
Okay. And um, by judging by like the skull that they found of this creature, do you think it would match up with what Sasquatch looks like? And would that one that was discovered, would it be more of a younger one or would it be full grown?
Though the one behind me was probably full grown, it was absolutely massive. And yeah, I mean, it's about as close to the description of today's Sasquatch as you can ask for. That's assuming it was an erect biped.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a lot of us know what the Sasquatch generally appears to be looking like in the Pacific Northwest. What do you think about some of the Sasquatch that have been seen on the east side of the continent or in the south by Florida? Some people call it skunk ape. There seems to be certain variations, possibly, of Sasquatch. What do you make of all of that?
Well, before 1995, I was absolutely agnostic to anything beyond the Rocky Mountains. I always thought that a lot of the so-called reports from the East was reports of other things, and that could be the case in a lot of them, because in the early years, John Green and Rene and Grover and police, when they heard of something like that, they just lumped it in with Sasquatch when it may have been something else. Now, a lot of the reports in the East, like in around Arkansas and Folk, you remember the Falk monster story and stuff, there was a general belief that the tracks were more three-toed rather than five. That actually is not true. That was all based on one particular incident. Most often or not, the tracks found were five-toed, just like in the Pacific Northwest. But based on climate and stuff and populations being cut off from each other, it's not surprising that something in the cold west coast mountains of British Columbia and Washington State would develop and change a little over the years compared to something in the swamps of Arkansas and Louisiana and Florida. I mean, we just don't know. We're still trying to answer question one: does the creature exist or not?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Interesting stuff. Um, What's the tallest Sasquatch you've ever heard of in a supposed encounter or sighting?
Would have to be the Bighorn Dam incident in Western Alberta in 1969, when five workmen were working on the water pumping station. They looked up into the high riverbank and they saw this figure walking along the high bank, and they watched it walk along the whole length of the bank, turn around, come halfway back, and then disappear in the woods. Well, two of the men that were down below went up to where it was. The men who stayed behind were amazed at their companions, who were both about 6 feet tall, were only half the height of the figure they were watching. So they estimated it was 15 feet tall.
Wow.
Now, at that time, I always assumed when someone reported a Sasquatch, and the first 20 years of my involvement in this mystery was in Western Alberta. Matter of fact, the title of my first book was called The Sasquatch in Alberta. And I noticed that between 1948 and 1984, there was a whole rash of extreme tall height reports. Now, during this time, you had regular height reports as well. By regular, I mean 6, 7, 8 feet tall, right? Which is still damn big. But for some reason, in this particular area, all within 8 miles of Abraham Link of the Bighorn Dam, there was a rash of incidents where people reported 12, 13, 14, and in this one case, 15-foot tall creatures. Matter of fact, one witness, Ronald Gimlin, driving along Highway 11, saw three of them cross the road, and he said every darn one of them was at least 12 feet tall. So I always wondered if they were just overestimating, but
Mhm.
it's strange that in Alberta, all the extreme height reports were in the same general area. And after 1984, they seemed to stop, whereas normal height reports carried on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was like,
Uh,
I wonder if the recent sightings, if there's been sightings there, were that tall, but I guess they haven't been.
as far as I know, the last one was 1984.
Yeah. Sorry, can you remind me which area was this?
The Bighorn Dam area or Abraham Lake area, just west of Rocky Mountains in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Mhm.
Wow. So when it comes down here to southwestern British Columbia, obviously there's been plenty of sightings over the decades and probably longer, of course. Um, are there any particular regions, people hear a lot about Harrison Hot Springs, they hear a lot about Chilliwack, maybe Pitt Lake or something. Are there any regions that stand out in terms of the density of sightings, or is it simply where the populations live along the mountains?
As far as I'm concerned, in British Columbia, you leave the town or cities, you're in Sasquatch country.
Hmm.
But Harrison Hot Springs is famous for one reason only. That's where the whole thing began. The Chehalis Reserve on the Harrison River on the west side of Harrison Lake is where Sasquatch got its name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a man by the name of J.W. Burns, who was filling in his time on the reserve as a school teacher, his real job was an Indian agent. In other words, he was a spy for the crown. But he got to know and really were well respected and liked by the people. And through time, they started telling him about when they got to trust him, they started telling him about their folk history, and their oral traditions. And they talked about this thing in the mountains around was rather ape-like in appearance. They saw called the Sasquatch. Sasquatch. The best way to pronounce it is take the word basket, drop the B and add SAS to it. Well, J.W. Burns used to write articles for magazines in Canada on, on life in the First Nations reserves. And there was an article he wrote that appeared in Maclean's magazine, April 1st, 1929, entitled Introducing BC's Hairy Giants. And in that article, he took the name Sasquatch and he misspelt and mispronounced it. He called it Sasquatch. And it's been known as Sasquatch ever since. And through
Oh,
time, it slowly drowned out all the other local names up and down the coast, like in Vancouver Island before 1929. Any story in the media that appeared about these things used the term Mowgli a lot, you know.
hmm. Yeah,
And
that's
of
right.
course,
I've heard that.
and the Americans only came up with their name Bigfoot in 1957.
Mm-hmm.
They never heard of the Sasquatch in Canada, so they called it Bigfoot, and that was picked up by the Associated Press, and Bigfoot was born. But technically, Sasquatch is a Canadian name, Bigfoot's the American name for the same thing. But that's why the Harrison Lake area, which is the area I spend most of my time now, is probably to me is the key area just because of its long, rich history of this. All the way along the all
Yeah.
up and down to Ruby Creek and Hope and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting to know. That's good
Mm-hmm.
information. That's fascinating. Um, in terms of the old school guys, like you mentioned earlier, guys like John Green and stuff. Do your methods today, or other people like you, do they differ very much from what their methods were decades ago to insert in terms of
Well,
searching?
our toys are a little more fancy. They didn't have the fancy toys we do, and I quite often don't have access to them either because I've never been a rich man. But no, it's basically still going out investigating sighting reports and interviewing witnesses, and of course going out trying to find physical evidence yourself. And all the years I've been looking, I've seen possible alleged footprints on 5 or 6 occasions, and there's a lot of blank space in between. The one time I may have actually seen one myself was in March of 2004 when I was taking a friend of mine named John Miles up the west side of Harrison Lake because he's sort of like a site watchman on at 20 Mile Bay. And I saw a figure on a cut line cross from the center of the cut line to the trees on the right hand side. It was only in view about 5 seconds. Didn't have time to bring my old Land Rover to a halt or grab the camera, which was sitting right beside me to get a picture. But like I said, I stick to the facts, never deviate from facts. I saw a figure. He was jet black in color. He appeared to be walking upright, but he was also too far away to see details. So I can't say with 100% certainty that wasn't an odd looking big man way up there. but
Yeah.
what he was doing there, I don't know. If that was a Sasquatch, I have seen one. If it's not, I still have not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like the other day, recently, a couple days actually, I went up in the mountains and I brought a really good pair of binoculars with me, which I normally have never done when I've been hiking, and I was testing them out, and they can see quite far away in pretty good detail. Has that been a tool you've ever
Oh,
used? Just
binoculars.
simple
Oh,
binoculars?
binoculars, of course, and spotting
Yeah.
scopes and cameras with zoom lenses. You name it, I've done
Yeah, yeah,
it.
fair enough. I kind of figured
Hmm.
that. Um, am I right in assuming that the Pitt Lake area is kind of a hot
Yes, it
spot?
is.
Yeah, I've seen some stories
Hmm.
online and I've heard some stuff from people as well about that area. Not even just Sasquatch, but I don't know, a lot of strange stuff in that
Giant
area, it seems like.
salamanders and all kinds of things seen in the north end of Pitt Lake. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I heard there used to be a guy who lived at the north end of it who would see these giant
Hmm.
salamanders come out of the water or something like that a long time ago.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know if that's because it's connected to the ocean or what the deal is with that, but um, I've heard some people suggest that Sasquatch have migration routes. What do you think about that? Somebody told me they think there is one at the north end of Pitt Lake, well, maybe further back into the mountains past that, but have you heard of the
I don't
idea?
think so because Sasquatch seems to be spotted in the same areas and all seasons of the year. We get reports in around Harrison Lake every month of the year, every time of day. They don't seem to go away or come back. I think the Sasquatch, now this is all hypothesis on my part, okay? And of course, assuming it exists. I think the Sasquatch, again, assuming they do exist, live in family groups, one dominant male and a number of females. Could be one, two, three, whatever.
Hmm.
And that dominant male tolerates the daughters, but when the sons get to a certain size, he drives them off.
Really, eh?
And
Huh.
this is what people are encountering most of the time. Young adolescent males getting bigger, getting stronger, getting bigger, getting stronger, moving from place to place. And maybe someday that young male, when he's in his prime, will encounter a family group and challenge the aged dominant male and either kill him or drive him off. And maybe some of these people who see what appear to be older gray tipped hair ones are dethroned dominant males that go back to that nomadic lifestyle if they're lucky enough not to be killed what replaced them in the first place. That's my hypothesis on that. And that's what people are seeing most of the time, these adolescent males. They're going from place to place, getting bigger, getting stronger, before they get into their prime and try to find a family group. And probably a lot of them never get a chance to take over a family group, and they live their whole life that way.
Hmm, interesting. Okay. That kind of, yeah, definitely reminds me about other species in the
Mm-hmm.
wild for sure.
Yep.
Hmm. Okay. In regards to the coastal mountains that we have around here, um, do you find that the Sasquatch is possibly more predominant here than it would be in, let's say, further interior into the country, like the Rockies and stuff like that? Is there just more vegetation, more food and stuff here?
I think the climate's better for them here because let's face it, our winters are quite mild compared to everywhere else in Canada. I mean, here in the West Coast, like this last winter, I think I saw 1 or 2 days with slight snow on the ground, and the rest of it was rain. A lot of snow when you get further up, of course, but compared to like Eastern BC and Alberta, my God, it's life is easier here for them. And of course, you get things like the salmon runs and the West Coast rainforest. The food sources are much more plentiful than anywhere else. I think there's probably more of them here, but not by a great deal.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I,
My guess is the population, there may be one Sasquatch for every 100 bears in any given area. But
oh,
again,
okay.
that's just hypothesis on my part. I think any more than that, they'd be seen more often, and if fewer than that, wouldn't be a viable breeding population. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And do you think there's a chance that like drones now, with having people having such easy access to them, high quality drones, could that potentially change the game in finding these and getting some
If
really solid proof?
they're employed for it, yes. I mean, most people have drones, yeah. But again, you'd have to catch one on a lake shore or a riverbank. I mean, usually when a drone flies over the trees, you see the top of the trees. You don't see what's down under them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking like when if they run through a clearing or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
might, maybe
Yeah.
somebody could get one.
Well, we're always hoping, just like trip cameras, and these wildlife cameras. People, I've employed them myself, but you got to remember, they're hoping that something in those hundreds of thousand acres is going to walk through that 80-foot space.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess drone regulations are definitely a lot stricter now than when they first came out, so people can't really fly them in provincial parks or national parks and a lot of places actually.
Yeah, yeah, they're bringing in more restrictions, but that's just politicians getting greedy for money grabs. You know that.
Yeah. Um so for Sasquatch and let's go down to the Sierra Nevadas for a second. The with Gimlin and Patterson, I'm not sure, correct me if was that in the Sierras technically or no? I know that
No, it
was
was in the West Coast Mountains in Del Norte County, Northern California,
yeah,
Bluff
North
Creek.
Bluff Creek, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think Sasquatch is as prevalent there as it is in the Pacific Northwest?
Yes, that
Oh,
is the Pacific Northwest. That's
I
part
guess
of
I
it.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I think a lot
That's
of
the
people,
Cascades.
right? I think a lot of
Yeah,
people kind of forget that part of California when they think Pacific Northwest. But yeah, you're right.
yeah. Or anything north of San Francisco. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
that's the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. And so you
Yeah.
think they're just as prevalent down there, eh? Because I know the forests down there are a little, they're definitely more sparse. Like you can see through the trees in the forest a little easier than you can up here. Uh, So that's what I
Yes,
thought.
but it's still pretty thick and pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you go down to Northern California, you get these redwood trees that are like 10 feet across. They're incredible. Yeah, yeah, no, it is wild country down there.
Yeah. So with the Sasquatch being, hypothetically, if it's real, being so good at avoiding people, even in this day and age, with a little bit of technology that we have, uh, do you think they possess some sort of, well, obviously, some intelligence that's probably higher than most other mammals, most other animals we know of, but how are they so damn good at hiding from us?
I think that's the key to their survival is they're elusive by nature. They probably yield to the ground of the first intruder, whether it's human or bear. I mean, the key to survival in wilderness is not getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a large, it's obviously strong enough to deal with some of these things, but it doesn't have the natural weapons. They don't have claws, they don't have huge canines. So I have the feeling they yield the ground to the first intruder. And most of the people I've interviewed over the years, they've told me if they hadn't looked right at it, they never would have known it was there. It was standing that still. And they don't usually come out of the trees to look at you. They're 20 feet back in the shadows looking at you. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
It's really interesting because we can get images of like really rare bobcats and other species that are so stealth and stuff, with people from National Geographic and stuff, but you can't get these things. I mean, you can, like, some people have some footage and stuff, of course, but it's always debated and whatnot, but we can't get something that's like really definitive. And I do believe that they're real, and that's why I find it so incredible that they're still able to avoid
So,
this.
so do I. And one thing that really bothers me to no end, and I can't understand why the skeptical don't point this out very often, is you know where Banff National Park is?
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was there all through the 80s because I started my first 20 years or so when this was on Alberta side of the Rockies. And when something was spotted in Banff National Park, I even got to the point where the warden's office would call me to look into it. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
And I investigated a number of incidents in the park. But in the late 80s, they had what along the Trans-Canada Highway that goes to the center of Banff National Park, they had what they called the red flag program, which is just trying to get people to slow down because they put a red flag wherever an animal was killed by a car. And it got to the point where there were just thousands of these things along the road. Everything from a squirrel, a raccoon, to a grizzly bear, right? And people would slow down. So finally they said, we're going to build wildlife fences on both sides of the highway with tunnels for animals to get from one side of the highway to the next.
Yeah.
And because they realized that a lot of animals didn't like the tunnels, they decided to build overpasses over the highway covered in trees. Well, since the mid 90s, they've been, and this is the only out of this because they're not 24/7, 365 days a year. They've monitored these overpasses and some of these tunnels with cameras. And since the mid 1990s, a couple days here, a couple days there, that sort of thing. They have gotten footage of every large animal you can think of in Banff National Park, except guess what?
Sasquatch.
You're right. They even got some footage of some pretty strange looking people. Yeah. But why has the Sasquatch not been picked up? They got to cross the highway like everything else does. That really bothers me. And I had an idea about 15 years ago. I called the Coquihalla Project.
Oh, I like that area.
Yeah, the Coquihalla High was built during Expo year in '86. Wasn't completed in time, of course. It was like 2 years behind schedule. But when they finally done it, again, wildlife fences all along, all the way down from Hope, all the way up to Kamloops in the north, right? That highway goes right through prime Sasquatch country, and they've got tunnels for wildlife. I had an idea we could cover those, but I don't have $2 million to throw away. Cover those wildlife tunnels and all the river and creek tunnels as well. Anything big enough for a man to get through. We could cover those 24/7, 365 days a year with solar powered cameras. And enough time goes by, and it has to be done in secret so you wouldn't get idiots trying to play games in gorilla suits and ghillie suits. Enough time goes by, we get footage of every large animal we know is there, and we don't get footage of a Sasquatch. That would convince me that the Sasquatch doesn't exist, and it's all mythology and folklore. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think you might have to do that yourself because if the government did it, I don't think they're going to tell us what they find if they do find Sasquatch on the
I don't
camera.
think there's any government conspiracy to keep it hidden. No.
But do you think they would openly tell us if
Why
they found
not?
it? I would think maybe they'd be worried about, tourism in the parks and all that
No,
kind
if
of stuff.
Sasquatch is real, that would increase tourism. It wouldn't diminish it.
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess I meant more so they would, I think they would think that when people go disappearing in the forest, which they sometimes do, not necessarily because of Sasquatch, but maybe they would think that, the public would perceive it that way or something. I don't know,
No,
and would hesitate to go in there.
there's been very few instances of Sasquatch intentionally harming a human being. And when you go in the woods and into the wilderness, you got to remember you're in the woods and in the wilderness. You may run into something that may want to eat you. And
Yeah.
it's more dangerous with things in four legs and claws and teeth than a Sasquatch. However, I'm not naive to think if you did run into a hostile Sasquatch, you would probably tend to disappear. Any animal,
Yeah.
but I think if they're that aggressive or like that, we'd know more about them by now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you think about some of the more odd disappearances that happen in the forest and the national parks and stuff. Do you think any of them are ever Sasquatch?
Again, who knows? I tend to think there are other things. You're in the wilderness and you trip and break your ankle or break your leg. Oh hell! And you're not prepared. You're going to disappear. I mean, the wilderness is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but it is wilderness and it's cruel and it can be brutal. And it's no place for the timid.
Yeah.
Not only hostile creatures that may want to eat you, any animal who can be aggressive if it feels threatened, accidents that wouldn't be a big problem in downtown Vancouver. If you're out in the middle of Garibaldi Park, you've got a problem. And no, people disappear in wilderness. It happens every year. Probably a lot of other explanations for it other than Sasquatch. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we have
I
a
was
monster out there that we have to be afraid of. No. Most encounters, they move away from people fast, and people move away from it.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely good to be with another person at
Mhm.
least and have a GPS device or something in the
Oh
forest, I
yeah,
guess.
you got to be
Yeah.
prepared. All the times I remember when I was younger, more gung ho. All the times I went out for a week here or there, all by myself, and didn't tell anybody where I was. Something happened with me, I'd be one of the stats. What happened to Thomas Steenburg? I
Yeah.
got chased up a tree and clawed by a grizzly bear in 1986. The luckiest
Oh,
day of my life. That could have been my last day
really?
very, very easily. And no one would have known. They just probably would have come up that road and stumbled across my Ford Bronco, which I was driving then, and wondering what happened to me.
Did you say you did get chased up a tree by a grizzly?
Yeah. Yeah. That was 1986.
Holy
Yeah.
Jesus, that must have been a harrowing
Oh,
experience.
yeah. Especially since I got about 8, 9 feet up the tree and it pulled me down, but it let go again.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And I went right back up the tree. I thought it was a black bear at first because it was jet black in color. And but I looked down when I was looking down at him. I realized it was a grizzly because I recognized the blonde head and the long foreclaws and stuff. But he was jet black in color, and he huffed and puffed and popped his teeth for about 8 minutes or so down there, and then he went back the way he came. And about an hour and a half after that, I came out of the trees, and when I got back to my vehicle, which is where my rifle, I left my rifle on my dad, I took off my day pack, and that's when I realized I was bleeding. And my day pack was absolutely eviscerated. But the only part that got through that and my shirt and the lower back were two small puncture wounds that required two. One had required 2 stitches, the other one required 3. And that's all that got through to me. Why it didn't grab my legs right into the pack, I'll never know, but I'm not complaining.
So you say it dragged you back down the tree. It didn't attack you once you were drugged down?
It let go again. I don't know why. And I went right back up the tree.
Oh man.
Yep.
So after that, were you a little timid to go back into the forest alone after that experience?
No, no, because I want to know if the Sasquatch exists. Okay, I want to know. Um, I'm dying to find before I'm no longer in this world. I'll find out whether or not I've been right or wrong. I want to know my days. I know when I started, I had visions of the ticker tape parade. Hey, I proved the stuff. But I gave up caring whether or not the public accepts the Sasquatch as being there or not a long time ago. I want to
Uh,
know, and that's why I basically still do it. Yeah.
and have you seen some of the footages online where people say, where they set up a trail cam and they get some pictures, but it's always, it's kind of hard to tell for sure. Have you seen some of them? What do you think of them? Do you think some people there might have some legitimate Sasquatch photos of the
It's
backside?
possible some of them are, but a vast majority probably aren't. Any photographic or video or still photo imaging where what's shown is open to interpretation as evidence is useless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best evidence to date? Is it still Patterson and Gimlin?
Probably the best piece of circumstantial evidence we have is the Patterson Gimlin film of October 20th, 1967. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I happen to think that that's real
Mhm.
myself.
I've been personal friends with Bob Gimlin for well over almost 30 years now. I've known him well, and I can't believe he's been lying to my face for 30 years. I just don't buy it. I
Yeah.
never met Roger Patterson. He passed away in 1972 of Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh.
And what I've learned about him in the Yakima region was in his personality. Well, you're probably too young to remember this, but there used to be a comedy show on television called Green Acres.
I know of it. I know of it.
Yeah. And there was a character in that show called Mr. Haney. And Yakima Roger was kind of like Mr. Haney. Everybody knew him. Most people liked him, but everybody knew, for God's sakes, don't let him in money because you'll never get it back.
Okay.
That was Roger Patterson. He was a very small man, only 5'2", and he got interested in Bigfoot. And the year before he got the film, he self-published a book called "Do Abominable Snowmen in North America Really Exist?" He got to know John Green and Rene hit him, but Rene always referred to him as that little bullshit artist. That's the way Rene would talk about him. He didn't trust him at all. And he rented the camera that day for that. Well, he was up in the Mount St. Helens region with Bob Gimlin, and they spent some time up there while the Blue Creek mountain tracks were being investigated by Green and DeHinden and Don Abbott and a bunch of other people in late August, early September 1967. And John Green sent a message to Roger's home, and his wife told him these tracks were found. And at the time, Roger was hoping to do a homemade documentary on his search for Bigfoot. And that's why he basically went down there, was to get footage of the tracks, or tracks was documentary. And unlike Bob, Roger was self-employed. He didn't like working for other people, but Bob had a job, so he had to. And there was another man who was supposed to go along, but his wife didn't want him to, so he had to drop out. But he rented from Shepherd's Camera Shop in Yakima a Cine Kodak K100, which is this.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that's the exact camera, type camera Roger Patterson used that day on October 20, 1969. Spring wound movie camera.
Wow.
Actually discontinued in 1964, but there's still a lot of them around, right? And you had to wind this thing with this switch. Took 100-foot rolls, and the little, I mean, looking through this viewfinder, what a horrible view. And you have to push this down to film, and you let go of it, it pops, it stops filming. So that's, and Roger stopped filming at least twice during that sequence. And of course, he spent so much time shooting footage of the beautiful fall scenery and stuff. He'd pass the camera off to Bob. Bob would film Roger pulling the pack horse, and Roger would film Bob pulling the pack horse. They only had 952 frames left when they had their encounter. I think personally that the creature was watching them and only reacted because the horses did. And if the horses hadn't reacted, in my opinion, and panicked, they may have ridden right on by her and never been the wiser. But the horses panicked, and the creature knows, I've been spotted, time to leave, and it walked away at a very excelled rate. And it left a good trail of footprints. And after it was gone, Roger and Gimlin stayed on his horse. He managed to control his horse, and he crossed the creek. As a matter of fact, if he had been a few feet ahead, he would have picked them up in the actual Patterson Gimlin footage. He's the one that actually got the good view of it by the eye, rather than Roger, who was looking through the lens of this horrible camera. Yeah. And history was made. And of course, it left tracks behind that day. And Roger being Roger, he ended up plaster of Paris to cast 2 of them. Here they are.
Yeah.
That's the 2 castings in the Patterson film site cast by Roger Patterson, October 20, 1967. These aren't the originals, of course.
Yeah.
These are copies, right? Originals are now in the Willow Creek Museum in Northern California. Now, Roger being Roger, he cast what he considered the best ones. And Rennie DeHinden went down there, or not Rennie DeHinden, Bob Timmons went down there 9 days later and cast 10 of them in a row. And he also cast the Laverty track, which is this one. And that's a fine example of a mid-tarsal break here.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, you got to remember, the foot that made this track made this one about 18 paces later.
Oh, okay.
This is when she was close to water and not moving very much. This is when she's stepping out and heading away. Look how much variance there is on that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and if you ever got a look at the second roll of film they shot that day, there's some incredible footprints that were never cast that show incredible toe movement and stuff like that.
Really?
But that's what happened. And
that's incredible that not only they got some footage, but they were lucky that the creature was walking on the kind of terrain to create such detailed footprints.
Well, that's Northern California for you. They got that grayish black sort of loamy soil there in a lot of the riverbank and creek banks that we don't have here in British Columbia. That is just, if conditions are right, it's excellent for tracks. It used to be a joke in the old days. If you want to see a Sasquatch, go to British Columbia. If you want to see his footprints, go to Northern California.
Oh, okay.
Because for many decades in California, they didn't harden their Forest Service roads. So you always had that fine layer of dust, and even a bird would leave a great set of tracks. That's why so many of the tracks were found in 58, 57, 63, were all along roadsides there. It's not that way anymore. They've hardened a lot of the roads. They've even paved a lot of them. So, yeah.
Okay. Coming back up to Golden Ears Provincial Park. I wanted to ask you about Golden Ears. That's I like that spot. That's one of the first place I started hiking actually. Um,
Magnificent.
yeah, and it's a very, I mean, it's a good sized park. Most people only just scratch the surface of it there, of course, in the main areas, the populated areas. But could you tell us a little bit about golden ears in relation to Sasquatch and what you've discovered about the region?
Well, Golden Ears, of course, the northern tip of Pitt Lake goes right into Golden Ears Park, right?
Yep.
And all that. But there's been a long history of sightings in Golden Ears Park and in and outside of the park too. I mean, that's right in the heart of its territory. Yeah, yeah, there's been a long history. Rennie the Indian spent a lot of time in Golden Ears Park. I've
Oh yeah.
spent a lot of time there myself. That's just a gorgeous place to go. Even if you have no interest in the Sasquatch, you just want to see beautiful mountain scenery. I can't think of any better place to go.
Yeah, it is pretty good. Um, from the sightings you heard of in Golden Ears, I would imagine most of them would have been closer to like the roads and stuff,
Well,
as opposed to way in the backcountry.
Sasquatch encounters usually occur more often than not when they come near people rather than the other way around.
Yeah,
Remember how I said about family groups and adolescent males getting bigger, getting stronger, wandering earlier?
yeah,
There's a lot of examples of little communities like DeRoche
yeah,
here in Lower Mainland where for years you don't hear of anything. Then all of a sudden, for a week or 2 to 10 days, several people have sightings and they stop almost as suddenly as they had started, almost as though one had come into the area, hung around for a little while, and then moved on.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's true.
yeah. So more often than not, sightings occur when they come near people rather than the other way around. You look at my maps here on the wall, you see almost every pin is either along a roadside or a riverbank or a lake shore. In other words, where people are to see them. If there's mass areas of green there with not a single pin, well, that's not because there's no Sasquatch there.
Hmm.
It's just there's no one there to see it, let alone report it.
Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, these creatures, I'm sure, they would be more likely to hang out. Obviously, they'll be up in the mountains, but would they be more likely to be hanging out by the valleys quite a bit because it's a not quite as harsh weather-wise, maybe more food.
And the
Uh,
part of the food, it follows the food.
yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion. Sasquatch, I assume, again, this is all hypothesis, because like I said, we're still trying to answer question one, right? Does exist. I believe if the Sasquatch exists, it's probably an omnivore, a diet very similar to that of a black bear.
Hmm.
90% vegetation, 10% meat.
Yeah, that's what
I
I was
don't
thinking
th-
of.
I don't think the Sasquatch makes a habit of hunting large game, despite what a lot of people seem to think nowadays. They may scavenge on things they find, and they've been known and been seen and witnessed killing small things like rabbits, raccoons, fish, of course, hens, things like that. But I've no reliable account where someone actually witnessed a Sasquatch stalk and kill a large game, even though they're obviously strong enough to do it and agile enough to do it. They don't seem naturally equipped to do it, like claws, canines, things like that. And I think if they were large predators, game predators, we'd have ranchers and farmers losing cattle and things like that every year, and that doesn't seem to happen. And when
Yeah,
it does happen, they find evidence of the bear that did it in the mountain lion or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
And now I know you're strictly zoological on the subject. What do you think about, some people claim in their sightings and stuff that, this thing has a voice on it, shall we say? Uh,
I don't know of a voice. They probably can communicate. I don't know if I'd call that a language.
well,
Um,
sorry, I meant to say like it can be extremely loud, like
oh, of
like
course, yeah,
the
loud beeps and screams and whistles, every kind of noise you see. But a lot of these alleged recordings of so-called Sasquatch, the witness never saw what was making the noise,
yeah, yeah,
right? And so there could be other explanations for it. I mean, in 2006, I got involved in what was known as the Chehalis Sounds. This elder couple in the trailer park there on the Chehalis Flats, just south of the Chehalis Reserve, where the name Sasquatch was coined. Something was making these piercing cries out in what was called the Chehalis Flats, an area most of the year is like a large a marsh off of Morris Valley Road, and in the spring it turns into a big lake as it floods from the Harrison River. But they described these screams, and the late John Green said, well, next time it happens, put your video camera out. And they said, why? It's pitch dark, you can't see anything. Yes, but at least we'll hear what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
we did. And I was excited, and my colleagues were excited, because these screams were exactly like the Puyallup recordings in 1969-70. There's a homeless recordings in 1979, and the Klamath River recordings in 1993. Recordings that I would have bet money on would be proven to be Sasquatch one day. Well, one early morning, April 6, 2006, Jerry Matthews and I were out in the flats again looking into the same mystery. We heard the cries. We went running towards them, thinking we're going to see what made them. And we did. It was a coyote.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it looked like invisible hands were squeezing this animal's guts when it let out this incredible cry. And I've had coyotes around me my whole life. You know, I thought I knew every noise it made. I'd never heard something like this come from a coyote before. What I think it is a location cry. Let another coyote know where it is. Because when a third coyote came bounding out of the bush, it looked like a happy reunion between puppies. You know, they're jumping all over each other, and they were all reverted to that yip, yip, yipping type sound we've heard a million times, and off they went, happy as clams.
Yeah.
But when I
Yeah.
announced this, I said, not only did we prove what the Chehalis sounds were, I think we've just explained away the Puyallup recordings in 1969, the Snohomish recordings in 1979, and the Klamath recordings in 1993. But when I announced this, so many in the so-called Sasquatch community who use these recordings in their call blasting expedition stuff just didn't want to hear it.
When you said it looked, I may have missed that. You said it looked as if a pair of invisible
Yeah,
hands were
you
squeezing
could
it
see
or something.
its guts around its stomach and hindquarters just almost like contract every time it let out this cry. It was really putting an effort in.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
It
gotcha.
looked like invisible hands were squeezing its guts when it let out this incredible cry.
Yeah, yeah. You know that's going to feed into some people's theories now, right?
The biggest problem with the Sasquatch community today is the community itself. I like to say the Sasquatch community today more resembles an asylum that's been taken over by the inmates. You know, you get people calling themselves researchers, but they're into, oh, it comes out of the fourth dimension, it changes to a glowing orb, it's associated with UFOs, it does this, it's that, it's a hobgoblin, whatever. No, I'm strictly zoological. I have no time for that nonsense. And to me, Sasquatch, if it exists, it's a zoological mystery. It's a higher primate, or it's mythology and folklore. One of the two.
What do you make of the sightings where people say that this thing not only yelled so loud, but they have the idea that it might possess some sort of infrasound ability because it, they say it made them shit their pants or something like that.
Infrasound's a possibility, though. If the Sasquatch does do this, it's the only primate on the planet that does. Infrasound, like you get that feeling that basically infrasound's a sound that human ears can't detect, but other animals can. And infrasound, you get that feeling, your hair stands up in the back of your neck and stuff. Who knows what causes it? And infrasound's a possibility.
Yeah, so it'd be kind of like a lion or something, but maybe on a bigger scale.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
right.
The most interesting recordings that I still have an interest in of a large Sasquatch scream was recorded on the Lummi Reserve just south of the BC border here by Deputy Sheriff Kenny Cooper in 1975. They did not see the animal emit these sounds, but they were looking at the animal just moments before it disappeared into the trees and the sounds came out. And Kenny Cooper had the good sense to put his police mic out, and it was recorded over the radio on a dictaphone, what they used to call a dictaphone back at headquarters. And it's a tremendous cry. I'd love to hear it in its original form without going through a police radio and a dictaphone. It was a blood-curdling cry. You can still find it on YouTube. Just punch in Lummi Sasquatch 1975.
How do you spell that? Sorry, Lumbi?
Lummi.
Lubby.
Yeah, Lummi.
Oh, Lummi. Okay, yeah, I might take a look at that afterwards.
Yeah. Lummi.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Cool. For you, like, in recent times, let's say the last 5 years, have you encountered anything in the forest in your research or in talking to people who have had sightings that varies or is unique as opposed to maybe the previous 30, 35 years?
I think the most interesting, I have some favorites, of course. The last one of real significance, there's been a few I've heard about secondhand since then, was September of last year in Golden Ears Park, which, just south of Garibaldi Provincial Park and stuff, just north
Yep.
of Maple Ridge there.
Yep.
And a doctor driving in was going to go to the hot springs in the north end and go swimming. He just happened to look in his rearview mirror and he said that was either a Sasquatch or the ugliest, biggest woman in history. Just crossed behind his car and he whipped around, tried to get another look at it, but it was gone.
Wow.
And he wanted complete anonymity. He first told his sister about it. The sister asked him to completely shut up about it, don't tell anybody. But he felt he should tell somebody, so he contacted me. I went and interviewed him and took a look at the area where it happened. I think this man really believes he saw something. And you always got to remember and keep in mind when you're interviewing a witness, there's only three possibilities. Only three. One, they saw a Sasquatch. Two, they mistook someone or something for a Sasquatch. Or three, they're lying.
Right.
Those are the only three possibilities. And I hate to say it, especially in south of the border, where you get all these wacky television shows that, the best way to describe them all is Duck Dynasty hunts Bigfoot.
The ones where they cut to commercial right when something exciting is about to happen,
And
and
then
then they
nothing
come
happened.
back.
Yeah.
Then they come back and nothing
Yeah,
happened.
and when I began, you used to have to pry information from a witness. They're very reluctant to talk about it. Now I get people contacting me because they want me to refer to them to Finding Bigfoot, the show Finding Bigfoot or something. There are people making stuff up just to get on the show.
Wow.
It happens.
Right.
And one of the biggest the internet, great tool that it is, in a lot of ways, is the worst thing that ever happened to this research because it's a soapbox for every snake oil salesman out there. But I find that people who are making stuff up, usually they continue to make the same mistake they did in the early years. They can't stop themselves. They got to make it that much more intriguing, that much more scary. And soon it isn't too long before the red flags go off in your head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there are so many researchers today people who call themselves researchers who, in my opinion, suffer from what I politely refer to as Ivan Marks syndrome.
I'm not sure who that is.
Ivan Marks was around the 60s and 70s. He was one of the key members in the Bosberg cripple incidents in 1969-70. He later on faked the film and tried to pass it off as the crippled creature and stuff. Basically, a researcher with Ivan Marks syndrome was someone who may have been involved in something real once. It's the center of attention. But when that attention dies down, the attention was more important than the subject. So they start making stuff up to remain the center of attention.
Right.
And it works until they get caught. I mean, to me, a researcher is somebody who's trying to find an answer to a mystery. It's somebody who's willing to admit, and in the end, and I don't personally believe this yet, you may turn out to be wrong. I accept the possibility that the Sasquatch may turn out to be nothing but folklore and mythology, but also may turn out to be something of flesh and blood, right? But I accept the possibility. So many of these people who call themselves researchers today, they seem more like religious leaders trying to push a faith than someone trying to find an answer. Yeah.
Has anybody ever asked you if you've thought about the idea, since Sasquatch seem to just disappear into thin air oftentimes or whatever?
Usually goes with the inmates in the asylum, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not literally in thin air, but since they seem to be so good at avoiding us.
Well, that's easy.
Has anybody ever asked you, like, if you thought maybe do they have holes? Do you think they dig holes in the ground and they just plop back into them or something?
No, I think they're very good at just keeping objects between themselves and who's looking at it. Gets a nice big tree, walks off in the exact direction. All you see is the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. and you look around, it's gone. You think, where did it go?
Yeah.
Well, it did. It walked off that way. It's still looking at you, but it's 80 feet over there. You haven't spotted it again. Yeah.
I've heard more sightings recently of people saying that they've seen these creatures really drop down on their belly on all fours, and they'll even
Yeah.
crawl in that position. What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
I've had one good report of that myself from a good guy, reliable, and he actually saw, he was only looking at the eyes because that's all you can see. He had one of those headlamps on. He was looking around and he looked, and he was looking at what he thought was owl eyes or something in a tree, but then suddenly they went down to the ground, almost like it had spotted him, and it turned in. He could just see the outline of it. It's like black shadow crawling away like a frog, through the bush. And
Yeah.
then it seemed he couldn't see it at this point, but he said he think he got up and started to walk normally because he could hear it crunching from the brush as it walked away. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard of that before. I've heard of them going down. Maybe when they're younger, we should be looking up in the trees rather than
Oh yeah,
around
yeah.
the trees. Yeah.
That reminds me of
Mm.
I was in a Cabela's, and they have all the the stuffed animals in there, and
Yeah.
one of the stores has a Sasquatch up in a tree.
Yeah.
And I actually and it was really appropriate because it was the last animal I noticed in the store. Actually, I didn't even notice it. A friend of mine told me, and I was like, "Holy crap! I didn't even see that there."
I guess Cabela's got one of those in all their stores. We got one here in Abbotsford that
Right.
has a, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you now just about specific regions. I mean, partially for my own curiosity, have you heard much about the Coquihalla region in Sasquatch?
Well, yeah, the Coquihalla runs through it. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Some interesting reports. Yeah.
More so sightings by the highway or what?
Both. More often enough in around Merritt.
Yeah.
If you ever get into Harrison, you'll see our little museum at the Info Center. One of the footprints cast there was sighting a lady and her grandchild found on the banks of the river on the edge of town. I mean, there've been all kinds of reports in and around that area, all up and down the Coquihalla Highway. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. And what about up in the mountains?
That's why I had the idea of the Coquihalla project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, any sightings from hikers in the region, up in the mountains?
Not as often.
Yeah.
Quite. It is seen by people in wilderness, but like I said, they seem to occur more often than not when they come near people. In other words, well, just ask your average person. Where are you from? Where are you talking from right now?
Oh, Abbotsford.
Okay, you're in Abbotsford. Ask the average person, have you ever seen a deer? They'll probably say yes. You ask them the circumstances, it was on the side of the road or crossing the road, and I saw it from my car.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Same thing with the Sasquatch.
Yeah, more often by the roads. And I guess that's kind of expected because people are more often by the roads. So.
Yeah, yeah, where people are, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier to avoid people in wilderness areas today than it was 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about Grouse, Seymour, Cypress area?
Yeah.
Lots of sightings out there.
Well, not lots, but they do occur.
Yeah.
All over British Columbia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the hottest spots in British Columbia? Let's say top 3.
I would say the islands between Vancouver Island and the mainland. Between Courtney and the mainland, of course, the Harrison Lake region.
Right.
Yeah. The Ruby Creek region. Probably the hottest areas to look. It's still considered Sasquatch country for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So Montana, Sasquatch country, right?
Yeah. There have been reports in Montana and Western Alberta as well.
Idaho?
Yes.
Oregon, I take it.
Yes. Pacific Northwest is all Sasquatch country.
What about Wyoming? There must be a good amount.
Yeah, you get them in every state nowadays, but whether or not they're true or people just making stuff up, I don't know.
Yeah. Colorado?
Yes. Well, the Rockies are in Colorado. Yeah.
Of course. And Utah?
Pikes Peak region, yeah.
You get much in Utah?
Not a lot, but it does occur. People, Arkansas too. People think Arkansas is all desert, but you go up in the northern corner of it, around Snowflake, it's all densely wooded. So yeah, there've been reports almost everywhere.
And Alaska, there must be.
Of course.
And the Yukon.
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, that should be part of British Columbia.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. Yeah,
We
I
got
I, I
we
still
got we
can't.
got screwed on that deal.
Yeah, exactly. I know. That was a shame, but I'm glad it's part of America instead of Russia, I guess.
Yeah.
So there, at least there's that. Um, okay. So in terms of your research you got going on now, you don't have to tell people because there's, I'm sure, a reason for a bit of anonymous areas where you do research and stuff like that. Is there any ongoing spots right now where you feel like there's more activity going on, or is it pretty equal?
It's pretty equal. Yeah. I got areas. Oh, excuse me. I got areas I
Yeah.
like to go to, but it's more or less not because one is more common than others. It's just that I'm getting older, and my ability to drive for long hours, I'm not as energetic as I used to be when I was young.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm 60 years old now. I just, if someone yells Sasquatch in the east part of the province, back when I started, I would think nothing that's gassing up the vehicle and driving all night long just to get there. But now I'll call a colleague in that area and get them to look at the to look at it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And what do you make of some people out there who seem to have either multiple sightings or even reoccurrent sightings, even if it's through the years or through the decades? Sometimes I wonder about that because I'm like, wow, it's hard enough for somebody to get a sighting just once, and it's hard enough for even a researcher to get a sighting just once. How is it that some people seem to have multiple of them? Let's say, even if they discounting the people who live on a property where they may exist or something.
and discounting the people who are making it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, you have to, if someone reports multiple encounters, I have to question it. I mean, it's possible that two or three, but some people claim 10, 12, 13. That to me, red flags are going off.
Right. So regarding the Native Americans, Aboriginals, whatever you'd like to call them, of North America, they have stories obviously of this creature going back quite a long time. Do you
As long
think
as
that?
they've been on the North American continent, yeah.
Yeah, so that I find very interesting. It's not really a modern day thing that began with Patterson and Gimlin, and now everybody just wants to pretend they see one or whatever. This seems like a very real thing. Does that often give you a lot of confidence that this being is a real thing?
I think First Nations and their oral history and traditions is an excellent record for the history of the mystery as a whole. I don't think they have any greater knowledge of anything than anyone else does. I mean, the Stahelas First Nation here, close to me, where the name Sasquatch was first coined, a lot of the older people believe the old stories and stuff like that, and the younger generations, well, they're like every other community in British Columbia. Half think if it exists, it's an ape of some kind. The other half says there is no such thing. It's mythology. You
Interesting.
know,
Yeah. Yeah, because I think a lot of people actually believe that most Native Americans do believe it's, but you're saying that many of them, some of them don't
a
themselves.
lot of them don't. I mean,
Yeah.
you only hear about the ones that say they do, but they're not going to keep the guy who says, "I think it's a lot of nonsense."
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier the islands between Vancouver Island and the mainland, may be kind of a hot spot. Um, could you explain how that is, considering, those are probably not too populated of places?
But that's exactly why. There are so many islands between the northern tip of Vancouver and the mainland. A man can literally get to Vancouver Island swimming from island to island to island if he's not lucky enough to run into a bunch of jellyfish or something. You know,
Yeah.
I went on an expedition in 2016 looking at the islands. We call it it had a silly name, Operation Sea Monkey, but we basically went island hopping looking for evidence. And we found evidence of everything you can think of except what we were looking for. I mean, we found wolves on the islands. They had to get there somehow.
Wow, really?
We found grizzly bears on the islands. We had
Yeah.
close encounters with grizzly bears on the islands. They got there somehow. That means they swim.
Huh. And sorry, would this be between the mainland and like the northern part of Vancouver Island, or
Yeah,
more?
yeah, yeah. Courtney, North,
Right.
yeah, and across there's hundreds of islands there.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah,
There's a lot.
you can hunt. Some of them are only a few hundred yards across. Some of them are a couple miles across. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard stories of people witnessing Sasquatch swimming and stuff.
Oh yes, you usually see most reports. And it's always the same. They just see the head above the water. It's not doing an overhand stroke like humans do. You just see the head.
Really?
They don't
Huh.
seem to have any fear of water at all. I mean, I had one reliable witness who thought he saw three of them come out of the water in Harrison Lake, two two smaller ones and a big one, and the big one actually paused and shook itself off before heading into the trees.
Oh, wow, eh?
Yeah. Did it
Really?
cross the lake, or were they just swimming or trying to catch fish? Who knows? But they don't seem to have any fear of water at all.
Hmm. Yeah, I I stopped along the Sea to Sky Highway one day there, and I was reading one of the descriptions of the folklore of the area, or legends, or maybe facts according to some people. And I was talking about Anvil Island, and it mentioned how the native peoples would see Sasquatch roaming around the shoreline of Anvil Island, I guess
Mm-hmm.
back in however long ago. So I mean, one would only imagine, how often that's happening on all of these islands, right? There's so
Mm-hmm.
many,
Mm-hmm.
so
A
many.
lot of a lot of the old stories said the Sasquatch came out on the beaches digging for clams
Hmm.
and things like that. They've been speaking. I don't know if a few it's a clam or fishermen who have seen them digging for clams on the beaches. A famous story from I think 1903 where a steamship pulled into Bishop's Cove, and all the First Nations in that area came out to the ship hoping to be protected from what was coming out, scaring them all, screaming on the beach. You know, all kinds of stories like that.
Yeah. Um, in regards to Banff and Jasper, the Kootenays, Selkirk Mountains and stuff, is there any spots out there that stick out in your mind, or is Sasquatch
All of them.
seem to be pretty evenly distributed in those areas?
Everything, all of them you just mentioned. There are
All of
good
them, eh?
reports and sites. Yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of interesting reports I looked into in the past in that area, especially when I was on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. I spent a lot more time there than here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, So, in Garibaldi, any sightings around Black Tusk, which is, well, Garibaldi Mountains right behind me with Garibaldi Lake here. Do campers and hikers have many? Because there's so many in this area, in the Whistler area, so many people that want to come up here. Are there often any sightings up in the Alpine?
As far as I know, yeah, but I've heard of a few over the years. Yeah.
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 And is the
It's not a
Alpine?
daily occurrence, but
Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Yeah, otherwise it'd be all over Instagram. Is the Alpine an area where they're not seen that often, or they're more seen, I guess, in the valleys and by water and stuff, I take it, as opposed to up in wide open spaces above the tree line?
I think so. I don't think they make a habit of going through the snow and the ice.
Yeah.
If you're going to find them, you're going to find them down where there's water available and a food source.
Yeah.
That's usually where they'll be. But I've heard of people seeing them high up, and I've heard of people seeing them low down,
Right.
all times of the year.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And I just want to throw this one out there, maybe for my own amusement, but what do you think about Dogman?
I don't.
That's kind of what I
Separate
thought.
mystery. Separate
Yeah.
mystery. I'm strictly Sasquatch. All the other elements of cryptozoology is interesting, but I don't look into it.
Yeah,
As far
yeah.
as I know, until Linda Godfrey wrote that book, The Beast of Blair Road, I think it was called, in 2009. I never heard of any dogman sites, but since that book came out, it has absolutely exploded.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So no, I don't think we got werewolves running around the woods, or we'd really have a lot of people go missing.
Yeah, there'd be some problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I was definitely interested to ask you today about different regions and stuff. So I'm getting the vibe from you that, Sasquatch is just everywhere where there's mountains and trees in British Columbia. There doesn't seem to be too many spots that maybe
In,
stick.
in
Yeah, go ahead.
British Columbia, if you have a healthy black bear population, you could have a Sasquatch.
Right. Yeah, because, we hear about certain regions where lots of strange stuff or Sasquatch
Mm-hmm.
is around, and I guess, it seems kind of obvious. I guess that it just depends where the people are.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm old school. Please don't use words like Sasquatches or big feet when you're talking about more than one. Think of it like moose or deer. You don't say mooses.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
saw one moose, he saw 10 moose,
Yeah, I
He
guess
saw
it's
one Sasquatch, they saw 10 Sasquatch. They saw one Bigfoot, they saw two Bigfoot.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's when I think of Sasquatch, I think of it almost as like this like godlike mythical being, and almost like
Yeah.
it's a singular thing. So yeah, it makes me say that. But yeah, I see your point. That makes sense. That makes sense.
And always use the Canadian term, Sasquatch, too.
I do. I rarely use the word Bigfoot. I think Sasquatch sounds a lot cooler.
When I started, nobody up here said Bigfoot, but because we watch so much American television,
Hmm.
listen to American radio, and read American books, I get more people using the American term up here than than even our own. So it's drowning out Sasquatch the same way Sasquatch drowned out the local names before it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's in number three and number four slot for names that are used today?
Well, Sasquatch here, Bigfoot. You got the Yeti in the Himalayas.
Of
You
course,
know,
yeah.
he's still in the Soviet Union. A lot of the local names in like the Fouke Monster in Arkansas, Momo in Louisiana, Skunk Ape in Florida. You know, yeah, there's all kinds of names for these things all over the place.
I saw a video from Florida of a supposed skunk ape. It
Yeah,
it looked like a really good video. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. Maybe I would imagine there's a
well,
good
there's a
chance.
number of them. There's one
Okay.
that impresses me that was taken from a guy in a canoe, one of those shallow canoes they have down there, and it was in the water by
Okay.
an old tree mix. I mean, it seemed to be grabbing a snake.
Okay. The one I saw, the thing was like crouching down, and it looked like it like ripped off of a piece of bark or something off of a tree, and it was kind of a
Maybe
thick,
the same one, yeah, maybe the same one.
and then
But
it
remember,
stood up all of a sudden.
yeah, and it moved on. And you're looking at a, but remember, when you're looking at it on YouTube, it's blown up. It was actually farther away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an impressive piece of video. Yeah,
Yeah, I thought so. I was like, wow,
yeah,
that one looks really
yeah,
real to
yeah,
me.
yeah. The make a photograph that got a lot of attention 10 years ago. I think that someone photographed an orangutan. That's what it looks like to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, and people got to remember in Florida. Well, there's an area in the Everglades, and there's a guy running tours with one of those, fan boats
Yep.
that were a popular group of islands here in the Everglades, where there's a breeding population of chimpanzees that got away years ago during a hurricane or something, and
Oh
they're
wow.
apparently thriving. So,
Holy shit.
yeah.
That'd be
And of
something
course,
to
they
come
got more
across.
Burmese pythons there now than they have in Burma. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what they're gonna do
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
I'm glad I'm here in British Columbia to look for this. I just got mountain lions and bears to worry about and wolverines. I don't like worrying about
Yeah.
snakes and other boys.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I I'm glad we don't have a lot of that slime. Well, maybe not slimy, but they look slimy and creepy
venomous.
crawly things. Venomous, yeah,
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. We got a nice, clean, kind of pristine wilderness with some big, strong
well,
animals.
yeah. That's the way.
Um,
Very
so aside
rare,
from
but definitely not. I don't think it's endangered. If there is a danger of the Sasquatch, it'd be loss of territory, not a bunch of people going out and hunting them or anything like that.
yeah, um, uh, I was gonna say aside from Patterson, Gimlin, and then the footage we just mentioned from Florida and stuff, what's some of the more impressive video footages you've seen?
Well, I'm still impressed with the redwoods footage that was taken in 1993 in Jebediah State Park in Northern California, where a crew who were filming a show that never aired. It never aired. It was supposed to be one of these, like inns of the Northwest, kind of thing. They go to stay at some place and they do a review on it and one episode and stuff. They got lost and went down the Rock and Jebediah State Park, and they're trying to turn this big Winnebago around. Remember, this is 1993, before the Blair Witch Project started this genre that people keep repeating all the time. And there are a bunch of young people that had a lot of time in their hands, a lot of beer, filming themselves acting like idiots thinking that only they and their friends are ever going to see this. When something crossed the road in front of the Winnebago, and you just hear the guy go, look, Sasquatch, right? And you see this figure cross the road, and it appears to be carrying a garter snake in its hand, probably with the intent of eating it. The problem is the man was holding the camera. He was standing behind the passenger seat. So you see the top end of the passenger seat in the shot. And then he moved to get down in the passenger seat. And when he brought the camera back up, that's when it stepped in behind the tree, and they never saw it again.
Yeah.
I went to that spot and looked at it, and I looked at that tree, and there's like a 15-foot drop off on the other side of that tree through a whole bunch of real thick stuff that's as thick as anything you'd find here in British Columbia to a riverbank. That's probably where the thing disappeared, if it wasn't a hoax. And I don't believe it was a hoax, because no one's ever come out to say it was, because the show never aired. So it was not a publicity stunt for the show that they were doing. A woman named Goodhart was supposed to host the show, and she was like Miss Playboy Centerfold in 1984 or something. So a lot of people thought it was a publicity thing because she was involved. I've been trying to find a copy of that Playboy, because I always like to have a picture of the witness for the file, but I haven't found one. But she and everyone in that Winnebago were acting like absolute morons, like young people with too much beer and time on their hands, do when they think no one's ever going to see this, right? And they had that encounter. And it's known as the Redwoods tape footage. I still think there's a possibility that that may be authentic. Because if it was a hoax, no one's admitted to it yet.
Yeah. There was another piece of footage I was thinking of. I can't remember, though, the name of the guy who took it, but it was from the 90s, I think around like 94 or something, and he had been known to be looking for Bigfoot. Sasquatch, he called it Bigfoot. Sorry, what?
Talking about the Paul Freeman footage, where he goes, said, there he goes.
That's right. Yeah, that one. Now, I looked at it and I was like, it looks pretty good, but I mean, I'm not as much of an expert as you. What do you think about that footage?
I knew Paul Freeman.
Okay.
I knew him well. Paul Freeman first got notoriety in the Sasquatch field when he was a watershed ranger in 1982. I defended Paul a lot longer than I should have. Paul Freeman, as a human being, you couldn't ask for better. If the world was filled with Paul Freemans, the world would be a better place. But for some reason, on this subject, Ivan Mark syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
I can't prove this, but in my opinion, the figure in the suit is his son, Dwayne, who's a very big man like Paul, and they did that together. That is my opinion. Yeah. Okay. Because I was told, I believe when Paul Freeman came up with his original encounter in 1992, I believed him wholeheartedly. But Randy would say, go talk to Ogden, go talk to this guy, go talk to that. And I did. And I listened and I learned. And Paul had nothing but Bigfoot on the brain from the first day he started the job. His coworkers say, hey, we've all been doing that route. We've never seen anything. First day Freeman goes out, he sees Bigfoot. So again, and that wasn't the first time Paul Freeman shot an alleged video of a Sasquatch too. There was one other, plus a series of still photos. And I think that you can't find that original video anymore. I think it was the same damn suit. Yeah, so that's my opinion on the Freeman footage. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
And what about besides the Redwoods one and the Patterson Gimlin, any other ones stick out in your mind?
Well, there's a few that stick out that may be a possibility, but the figure's so far away and everything, they really don't amount to anything. It's like I said when we first started, any video where the subject in question is open to interpretation as evidence, it's just gone out the window, even if it was a Sasquatch.
Yeah. And what's your opinion, if you want to share, on some people, debating whether they would hunt one or shoot one just to finally get a body?
Well, that's what has to happen. The Sasquatch mystery will remain in the realm of cryptozoology until science gets what science has always demanded. And when you ask them that, They're always unanimous. They need a body or piece of a body or sufficient skeletal remains. And no amount of politically correct wishful thinking is ever going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works. Now, it is possible that we could find the remains of a Sasquatch. And I've had this thought too recently, that it wouldn't surprise me if instead of being, if skeletal remains of the Sasquatch are ever laid out on the table for the world to see, it's not going to be found by some researcher who came across them in the bush. It's going to be found by some anthropology student who came across them in some long forgotten museum box or drawer somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, they've got stuff down in their archives that they've never put on display. They don't even know if they have, let alone remember how they got it.
Who are you talking about? Sorry.
And most of your big museums, the Smithsonian,
Smithsonian. Yeah.
you name it. Vancouver Museum, the Victoria Museum. Maybe a good idea to go to museums and say, "Show us your dead."
Yeah.
Because they got stuff there, they don't even remember where it came from. They see a date in the box, 1951. They have no idea. It's gone and it's lost. And there's been a few stories of large bone fragments being found and stuff and turned into museums, and they just, well, thank you very much, and it's forgotten about.
Yeah, well, some people that believe in like giant people, like giant humans, so not necessarily Sasquatch or Gigantopithecus. There are claims out there that there are plenty of news stories from the 1800s and in the early 1900s, last century, just from random little towns and stuff, documenting how so and so found like some huge skeletal remains that were 9 feet tall or whatever, and then they just seem to disappear, and nobody knows where they are anymore. I don't know if it's the Smithsonian or who's taking it, or if it's even Sasquatch or not. But what do you think about that possibility of maybe even just giants in general?
Well, I'll tell you one story locally here. There was a fellow here who was a local character named David Alexander who passed away about 10 years ago. But he remembered a story, and there's a book out that talked about when they built the Ruskin Dam, which is just west here of Mission.
Yeah.
They had to move a bunch of people because the areas were going to get flooded. And there was a story of a large skeleton. They don't know if it was human or whatever. That was found when they were excavating for the Ruskin Dam. Now the story was that those bones ended up in the Mission Museum right here in town.
Really?
And even said, the title of the book's gone out of my head. I think it was mentioned in the book, but I inquired into the museum. They have no idea. They said most of whatever remains we have all been repatriated to various First Nations and stuff like that long ago. And if we had anything like that, it's long gone. The only thing they have associated with the Sasquatch is one footprint casting donated to them by John Green of the Mission hoax back in 1977.
Oh.
Yeah, but no, again, there's a big story. Someone even mentioned it in a book. But when I looked in and followed up on it, dead end.
Yeah.
Yeah, dead end. And that has happened time and time again.
Yeah, I wonder, it'd be interesting to know where those bones wound up.
And if you're going to find a skeleton of Sasquatch, it probably won't be like, I have never come across the remains of a bear that have not been killed by people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm still waiting to see my first Wolverine. I've only seen mountain lions twice, and that's in 42 years of searching.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I have never really found an entire carcass of a deer or an elk. I have found scattered bones here, maybe another 100 yards, you find the leg bones, because when something dies out there, nature's disposal system is very quick.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you come across something that really stands out, like the jawbone or the skull, I doubt most people would even know what they're looking at.
Right. Do you think Sasquatch might bury themselves?
It's possible.
Not themselves, but they're.
It's possible. Bears bury other bears, but that's not because of any, feeling of burial. It's because they're scavenging on it and they cover up their food.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Sasquatch, it's possible. It's possible, but who knows? I don't know. Bury them, maybe cover them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you heard of any sightings where that stand out to you in terms of Sasquatch seeming to show very human-like qualities?
What do you mean by human?
Well, uh, anything, very different from like let's say what you would expect from like an ape, a great ape or
Well,
something.
the biggest similarity of human quality is to the fact they're bipedal. They walk upright like we do. That hits them. We're not talking about some four-legged or four-flipper Loch Ness monster type. It looks like us, and that brings that it's something in people. And a lot of people think they got to be closer related to us, but you got to remember, in a zoological sense, human beings are apes. We're primates.
Yeah.
We're just different. We've learned to deal with cold weather and climate because we use our heads. We invent things like clothing, shelter, things like that. If we didn't have those abilities, we'd only have one alternative, and that's become very large and have a body covering of hair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's not surprising the one higher primate that exists in the Western North America is a very hairy and a very large one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What do you make of some Sasquatches? At least some sightings,
Oh,
which
Sasquatches. You mean
I,
Sasquatch?
it's yeah, Sasquatch. Some that's a bad a habit I got to break. But some reports, I think usually more so in the middle or southern United States, where they seem to appear a bit more ape-like, with like jagged, with like sharp teeth that are a little bigger, that show more. The snout and the face look a bit more ape-like, whereas Pacific Northwest, not so much. And then in the
Well,
Appalachian,
they're basically like here too in appearance, except they're flat faced.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's still rather gorilla like in appearance.
I should say there's been some sightings where they look more baboon-like, more so in the U.S. and not really up here in the
That's
Pacific
that.
Northwest.
You're getting into the dog man stuff and stuff like that.
Well, not.
Like if that's a snout, it's not a Sasquatch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Maybe it's Dogman. I don't know. um, okay. Well, I guess we're at about hour and a half here. Um, yeah. So another thing I was thinking about asking you is the most realistic or supposedly realistic looking footage I've seen so far, um, although I'm not convinced it's real, is the Todd Standing footage. And
I don't believe a word Todd Standing says.
I've heard that
He's the
from
best example of Ivan Mark syndrome going now. That is my opinion, and I will say no more about
because fair enough. Yeah, I saw one of his videos and it looked like a really realistic thing or just incredible CGI. But then another of the creatures, which was supposedly a younger one, it kind of just looked like an Ewok from Star Wars or something, and
it.
I
Well,
didn't
we
really know what
we
to make
call it
of
the
it.
first one that was sort of like yellowish. We call that the David Bowie Sasquatch, and
Oh,
the Chewbacca Sasquatch. Todd Standing seems to have an unnatural talent for photographing his face and head, but missing the rest of it.
oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And one point, it looks like he's below it, and it's above him, and it's still staring straight ahead, not looking down at this weird guy who's standing around his crotch somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't know what to
Yeah,
make of it because the one creature looked, looked really impressive. If it wasn't
yeah.
real, then I guess it was impressive in a
You can devote a whole show to
CGI
why
way.
I don't believe in Todd
Yeah.
Standing, and I'll just tell you, I don't believe a word the man said. As far as I'm concerned, Ivan Mark syndrome.
Have you ever had any people in British Columbia or wherever you've researched the sightings mention to you anything about any sort of psychic phenomena? And if they do, do you pretty much discount it?
That goes into the realm of the paranormal, and I don't think a creature of flesh and blood has anything to do with it. No.
Mm-hmm. Have you had
Yeah.
people tell you that though, or no?
I've had people tell me a lot of weird stuff.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
And for
lots of
every
interesting.
legitimate setting I hear, I've heard of, well, let's say two or three that are rather
Mhm.
weird. There are a lot of women with some weird sexual fantasies out there, let me tell you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've probably, I guess it comes with the territory.
Yeah,
You've heard
yeah, yeah,
stories, so you pretty much gotta chalk it up as par for the course, right?
yeah.
Okay. Um, uh, regarding books, if you could remind me, now I read, I may have read two of your books. I know I read at least one. What were the names of your books again?
The first book came out in 1989. It's called The Sasquatch in Alberta.
Okay.
Okay, it was about because I spent my first 24 years or so in this on the east side of the Rocky Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
No one had ever written a book about Alberta before, so I thought I'd write the first, and I did. And that came out in 1989. It was republished by Hancock House in 2018 with some stuff added on that I've heard about then. Even though I left Alberta in 2002, I still heard about stuff. So, yeah, the second book was called Sasquatch, Bigfoot, The Continuing Mystery. That came out in 1993. And the third book, and the one I'm most proud of, is called In Search of Giants. That came out in 2000.
Ah, yes. I think
Yeah,
I know I read that one.
yeah.
Definitely.
Yep. And since then, I've co-authored two other titles. Meet the Sasquatch with Chris Murphy and John Green. That came out in 2004. And in 2012, Chris Murphy and myself published Sasquatch in British Columbia. And that's an excellent book, too.
I think I have that one.
A chronicle history from 1700 to 2012.
1700. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you wouldn't believe, I mean, we can only put so much in, and there was a lot of stuff we had to leave out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine. I mean,
Mhm.
once you go digging and stuff, you can probably find a lot of stuff, probably more than people realize.
Oh, yeah. A lot of history. I've got British Columbia. I'm on my 200th and 20th file.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And how many in Alberta?
Oh, Alberta's about 100, I think, between 90 and 100. I never really counted them. Well,
Yeah,
give me a hint. Give me a hint here. I don't know if you can see this, but
sure.
I don't know if you can see this very well, but that's my old Alberta map right
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
Every pin, see Calgary there, every pin is a sighting report that I looked into, and every red one's a alleged footprint finding. And of course, here's the lower mainland of British Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Lots.
all of them.
Yeah.
And those are just mine.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the ones I
exactly.
looked into. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
just
handy having a camera. You can actually show people this stuff.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah, the camera I'm using is like built into my computer. I want to buy another one that's even a little bit better quality. I can move around.
Yeah. That's the BC map, and I kept my Alberta map. I had on another map in northern Alberta too, but there was only like 8 pins in it, so I thought, nah,
Oh, yeah.
get rid of that one. Save room.
So, out of the sightings you've had, you've investigated, um, I was going to ask you, which one or two stories stick out in your mind the most in terms of just like where you're just like wow, like a wow factor, like wow,
My
did that
favorite
that really happen?
is happened in '86. Later on, 1986 is the best one of my best years of my life because I had the whole summer off with pay, and I left in May, and I didn't come home until almost Halloween. In August of '86, and it was in Chilliwack, and I heard from a guy in a coffee shop that an American couple had just seen something weird down at a little campground off by the Chilliwack River. So I went down there, and back in those days, it was a dirt road, wasn't paved yet. And I pulled into what turned out to be the exit rather than the entrance. And coming out of the campground was a red pickup truck with a camper on with Utah license plate. And I said to a couple of folks, have you heard of anything strange being seen here? And the wife said, oh, you mean the Bigfoot? And the
Wow.
husband just looked at her assistant saying, shut up. I managed to calm him down. It was a Mr. and Mrs. Harris from Salt Lake City. They're the ones that had the encounter. They were fishing right in the Chilliwack River there, and all he remembered, he looked at his wife, and she's pointing up, open mouth, back at the campsite. And he looks up, and he sees a gill stringer that they had about 3 or 4 trout hanging on. And this ape-like thing was standing right beside it, smelling the fish, and its head was higher than the hook they had the stringer hanging on. The hook is actually made for a lantern, but they had the stringer hanging up, and they're going to clean the fish and eat them for supper. And it grabbed the stringer fish, pulled it off the hook, and went rocking through the campsite and disappeared across the main stone and disappeared along Blackstone Brook.
Blackstone Brook, and this is in the Chilliwack region.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Bald Beard Creek. Excuse me, I get my creeks mixed up.
Okay, Bald
Bald
Beard
Beard
Creek.
Creek, yeah, that flows into the Chilliwack River at that point. The area today is called Riverside Recreation Area, but in the back in 1986, I
Oh,
don't think it was named. Yeah, there were no outhouses available or stuff like that. It was a nice camping area, but among some big old growth trees, but it wasn't maintained very well. And I went searching after they left. I got the whole story from them. I went searching along Bald Bear Creek and I found the tracks. The witnesses never saw them.
oh, really, eh?
Yeah. And I cast two of them. And I think if I hadn't come across those tracks and that incident in 1986, I may have caved into my ex-wife's demand to put the Sasquatch on the back burner and concentrate on more important things.
Oh, wow.
But that was it. I wasn't going to give up on this after
Sasquatch saved your ass there.
that. Well, or condemned it. It all
All
depends on your
right.
point of
Yeah.
view.
Yeah, I
All
guess it
depends on
depends.
your point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. And there were hundreds of these impressions in the ferns and the grass down there. And it almost looked to me an area where some old growth trees were, but the thing was malingering around and scattered all over the place in different points, like a man looking for his keys, that he dropped,
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it stopped at that point, was probably looking to see if it was being followed. Then the trail went off towards this rockside area on the side of Ford Mountain, where some of the boulders was the size of cars. And I never found where it came out of that rock slide area. I spent 3 days there trying to figure out where I had gone and finding more evidence. Never found the fish gill stringer either. Maybe still lying out there somewhere. It's known as the Chilliwack River Find. It's one of my favorites. Another one is the Crandall Campground incident in Waterton National Park
Hmm.
in 1988, where two couples, both men were engineers, 12 of whom were school teachers, were playing cards, and it was the Victoria Day long weekend. Susan Ray Adams noticed, thought it was strange that all the deer were gone. This is one of those wild campgrounds where the deer literally come out and eat out of people's hands, She noticed they were gone. Susan and her husband decided to walk down the path towards the public washroom facility to brush their teeth before turning in. And all they saw over the crest of a small rise was the glow of the one light bulb at the entrance to the bathrooms, right? This thing was on the trail between them and the bathroom. They almost said they got another 10 paces, they probably would have walked right into it. And it let out a deep throaty groan at them.
Hmm.
He described it like a bull letting out a lot of air, just to say, "I'm here, stop." Susan, being scared, she said, "Holy blank, 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 that's a blank, blank, blank bear." Because Waterton Lakes National Park is famous for its bear population, grizzlies and black. And she pulled away from her house and she went running back to the cars. But Scott Stone-ass, cool-headed, he slowly backed up and he kept his eye on it. He just said he just saw that shadowy figure move off the trail to the left into the darkness. Now, the other couple heard her yell bear, and it was helter-skelter for the cars. They had two cars there sitting back to back. Susan got in the car. And Scott came back. He tried to get in the car with his wife, but she had locked the door and she wouldn't let him in. I guess somebody had to be sacrificed. So he ended up getting in the car with the other woman.
Oh my God.
And both cars turned on their headlights. This thing walked in the area illuminated by the lights. It was heading out of the area towards Blackstone Brook, which runs alongside of Crandall Campground there. And they both watched it. It just sort of turned towards the lights and they just caught it as going through. And they described, "Oh my God." The other guy named Darren Gillis got on and said, "You know what that was? That was a blank, blank, blank Sasquatch." Both men wanted to get into one of the cars and go looking for it again. The two women wanted nothing to do with that. They wanted to leave. Matter of fact, Susan had enough of camping. She wanted to head back to Calgary. But they managed to calm her down. And they went driving around trying to see it again. They never did. But they did run into a pickup truck with 3 other people in it. They said they had seen something strange and they were looking for it again too. So what these 4 witnesses did was the odd thing. They reported it to the park warden's office the next day. And Park Warden Alan Dibbs told me he did everything he could to convince these people, it was probably a bear. Bears sometimes stand on their hind legs, begging for food, things like that. They were unanimous. They would not accept it was a bear. And Darren Gillis insisted on writing something out, a report. He insisted. They say they were willing to listen to start dealing with that, but he insisted that he write something out. As far as I know, that report is still on file in the warden's office in Crandall Camp or Waterton Lakes National Park in southwestern Alberta. It's known as a Candle Campground incident. I think someday it's going to be considered one of the classics.
You said
The only
Campbell?
question, yeah, Crandall Campground is.
Oh, Crandall. Okay.
Yeah, Crandall Campground's a campground in Waterton Lakes National Park. They're in Site C3. I covered it quite extensively in The Search of Giants if you read the book. Yeah. And I did it in the Alberta book as well. What was I going to say? My only question is, who were the three people in the other truck? Is it possible these three people have pulled off a prank of some kind and were just hanging around to see if their theatrics were successful?
Did the people mention how tall they thought the thing was?
Yeah, about 8 feet tall.
Okay.
They thought it was rather thin in stature compared to the Patterson film, but massive in total.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't know the gender of it, but they assumed it was male because it didn't have any breasts.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to fake, 8.5 feet,
You'd think.
with being on stilts. Like, how are you going to do that?
You just got to look at all the possibilities.
Yeah.
Because the three people in the other truck, I was never able to track them down. And I still to this day don't know who they were. But they did the normal thing. It was our four main witnesses did the odd thing. They reported it to the warden's office. Yeah, that's known as a Candle Campground incident. Another one I have here, 2008, Bridal Falls Forest Service Road. You know where that is, just down the Trans-Canada Highway towards Hope.
Just past Chilliwack.
Yeah. 2008, there were two incidents, 4.5 hours apart, within a kilometer of each other on the same stretch of road, by two different witnesses who didn't know about each other. I tend to think it's a grand possibility, even though I can't prove it, that they both saw the same animal. Yeah, one going up the mountainside, one going down.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. Because they both of them saw it on the road. Yeah.
Just past Bridal Falls.
Bridal Falls Forest Service Road. That goes up to Mount Cheam. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know there was a Forest Service road.
Well, there was. I haven't been up there now in 5 years. I mean, I closed it off, but there was for a very long time. Because there's a high lookout up there, halfway up, that a lot of couples like to go because at night you can see all the lights of the Lower Mainland on the distance. It's a very nice view. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, great. All right. Well, thank you for sharing those.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, we heard about this. I heard about this incident, this first incident, in a rather weird way. The husband said, "Don't tell anybody that we possibly saw a Sasquatch tonight." But she told a friend.
Oh, yeah.
Whose husband used to work at the mill I lived at then, and he remembered me and what I do.
Oh,
so
wow.
Like 24 hours, I'm phoning him, and his first words to me was, "How the hell did you hear about this?"
Oh, wow. You're meant to hear about that one.
But I calmed him down. I went and interviewed both him and his wife at their home. And the next day, he took me and my colleague of mine, the late Bill Miller, who just unfortunately passed away this past October.
Oh.
He took us to the site where it happened, and we could see where something had come across the road and plowed through the thick bush. Something big. No distinctive tracks, but we could see where something had crossed, someone or something had crossed there. Now, this other young man, that just happened that the Chilliwack paper was doing a story on the Sasquatch in general. And when he said, "Oh, we just had this incident, we won't give you any names, but if you want to include in the story, we'll tell you about it." We took them to the site. And the story appeared in the Chilliwack paper called "If You Go in the Woods Today." But this other young man saw that and said, "My God, I saw something on that same road the next night."
Oh, wow.
And we went and interviewed him. He contacted us through the paper, and we went and interviewed him at the site of his sighting. And he said it was a nursing stump beside the road. And he came around the corner in his headlights on it, and he said it was like, the only way to describe it, said it was almost comical, like a ninja. It literally scrambled up and went over the stump rather than go around the side of it, and he could hear it smashing through stuff as it ran down the mountainside. He thought his sighting was the following evening. When we interviewed him, we realized his sighting was actually 4.5 hours before the first one we were.
Oh.
He saw it at 10:30 p.m., 18th of August. Midnight rolls around. It's now 2 a.m., 19th of August, when our first incident, they were coming down and they had their encounter. So even though he thought he saw it the following evening, it turned out to be 4.5 hours before. and they're only about half a kilometer apart on the same road. So I think it's a fair bet that they saw the same animal. Can't say
Yeah.
that for certain, but I think it's a fair bet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are probably
Wow.
my favorite ones in recent years. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's
And if there is a
that's a
Sasquatch, I think they saw one. Yeah.
yeah. I I I would probably tend to agree. That's a tremendous amount of wealth of information and stuff you've bestowed upon us here in the last almost 2 hours. Um, I think we're at the end of it because I know you have another engagement that you have to attend to. Um, and I was gonna say, do you have any specific website or anything
Yes,
that?
I have my Facebook page. I also have a blog site, Thomas Steenburg, or www.thomassteenburg.com. I
Okay.
also have a YouTube site, and you can always contact me by email, sasquatch@telus.net, or phone me at 604-826-6150.
Okay, the
Yeah,
Sasquatch hotline.
yeah,
Okay, and so thomassteenburg.com you said,
you're right.
and if there's a Facebook page as well.
Yes,
Okay, and just that Facebook page is just like your name.
yeah,
Okay, that would be Steenburg. Am I right?
yes, Steenburg.
There you go. Okay,
Yeah,
and then of course you have your books that are out as well under your name that people
yep.
can check out.
And as far as I know, I still see them on the bookshelves every now and then, so they're still circulating. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I've seen
yeah,
some at certain shops. You know, some gem store in Harrison. I see
yeah.
them around here and there sometimes.
Or
Uh,
you can always order a copy straight from Hancock Out Publishers. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Well, Thomas Steenberg, I appreciate you coming on today and generate or generously giving us a good chunk of your time here. That was a lot of fascinating information and stuff, and it's good to hear it, from somebody who's been in the field for so long now,
Yeah.
uh, doing so much, and hopefully you'll be in the field for a long time to come too.
I certainly hope so, man. Always remember, mate, and everyone out there who's interested in getting involved in this country, stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts.
Okay.
Yeah. And a healthy dose of skepticism is the best quality a researcher can have.
Yeah, and a bit of open-mindedness, right?
Absolutely. Not closed mindedness. That's the key.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for being on today.
You're
And
very welcome. Yeah.
for those listening, check out what we just went over there to do with Thomas, and like, subscribe, leave a comment maybe here if you're watching this on YouTube, and maybe leave a rating on the podcast platforms if you're listening on Spotify or Apple or Google or whatever else. It's on a lot of things. All right. So we'll see you next time. And thank you, Thomas, and have a good one, everybody.